Hey everyone, we continue our series in creating a chat app in Flutter the right way. And in this video, we'll be looking at creating our message service and also testing our message service. So before we get started, we want to ensure that our Docker container is up and running. So you can go to your terminal and enter the command docker container ls to list and all. This should show you a list of all containers. And see, we have our rethink db container here, which was created 2 days ago, and it is not running. So to get this up and running, go ahead here and get the name and docker container start and the name of the container, which is festive Mietner. That should get my container running. Great. So if I go docker ls, I should see a running container there. My container is active up 6 seconds ago. So now we are ready to get started. So I'm just going to go to my models now and create my message model. And for my message, for its property, I'm just gonna collect from, and this represents the ID of the person from whom the message is coming. I want also to, as you might suppose, the person to whom the message is going. I want the timestamp, which is a date and time of the message, and also the contents of the message. In this app, we'll not be looking at multimedia types. We'll be only looking at text, but it can be easily adapted for other media types. So inside of our message class, I want also the ID, which will be a private variable like our user, since the database will return an ID when this message is written to the database. So if we should go ahead with our constructor, just gonna say all these fields, I'm just gonna copy all these fields. Just gonna paste. Paste them right there. And for my content, let me replace these with comma. And I want all these to be required fields. So go ahead at required. I'm just gonna import that from foundation. So now for our ID, I'll also have the setter, in this case, which will return our ID. So next, for my message, I'm just gonna create those helper methods for the toJSON method and the from JSON method. So go ahead and add all those message properties, which is from, which should be these two, and also the date, or timestamp rather, timestamp, and the contents. Contents of the message. Next, I'll go ahead and create my factory helper method that basically return that message from a JSON object. So now this be a type map string dynamic, and I'm just gonna parse this JSON for my message. So message equal new message, just gonna create a new message from this JSON object. So I'm gonna say from JSON from, go ahead and to pull out the other properties. And our timestamp. So we created our message there. Now we need to also set the ID. Since it's a private variable, we need to go ahead and set that ID property. Equals the ID from the JSON, which again is the ID that was generated by the database. And let us just return that message object. So now we have our message object. We can now go ahead and create our message service. So again, inside of services, now the folder message. Side of the message, we have our message service contract, which is the abstract class that represents those methods that our message service will implement. So abstract class iMessage service. And for our message service, we want a couple methods. We want a method to send message. Again, this will be a future bool, which tells whether or not the message was sent, and it will accept the message to be sent. Next, we want a stream of messages. So this will be a stream that we will subscribe to get all our messages. And for this, I'm just gonna add the user. So you will subscribe with your user ID. So you'll only get message for your particular user. This will filter out all the unnecessary messages so that you only see message that pertains to you, or you subscribe to only messages that pertains to you. So that is our contract. So now let us go ahead and implement our message service. So message service impl dart. So for our message service implementation now, again, this is a Rethink DB implementation. Since we're using Rethink DB, so there are a few properties that we must inject, again, like the connection property and also the Rethink instance, which I use R to refer to. I also need a stream control, and this will manage my message stream. So I'm just gonna create a stream controller, and this will be of type message. And what I want is a broadcast stream and not just a regular stream, because the difference with a regular stream and a broadcast stream is that the broadcast stream can be subscribed to by multiple clients, while a single stream can be subscribed to by only a single client, after which the stream will be closed. So I want my stream to be accessible to multiple clients, so I make it into a broadcast stream. Then I want to, inside my controller, inject these things: message service controller constructor R and the connection. Now I also, let me go ahead, because the dispose method is quite simple. You simply dispose of the stream. So controller and I'm just gonna close the controller. So when the dispose method is called, it will close the controller. Now for my send message, this is pretty simple. All I am doing is inserting the message in the database. So I'm just gonna say record, which is a record returned from the database. Await, make this async, and I'll say rethink, give me the messages table and insert my message. In this case, actually all this should be wrong method, should be here. So message to JSON, then run my connection to get that inserted. Now I'll simply return a simple Boolean check whether the message is inserted or not. So if the message was inserted, then the record will have a inserted key with the value 1. So that tells whether or not the message was inserted. Now for our stream, what I want to do is to say that because a stream is memory, consumes memory, you do not want to activate a stream without anybody subscribing to that stream. So I'm just going to create a method first that says start receiving messages. Start receiving messages. And this method will accept the active user and return controller stream. So now I can create this private method, start receiving messages. So now in this method, we are going to make use of RethinkDB real-time capabilities. So there's in Rethink what is called a change feed. And this change feed is basically a stream of events or data that happens on that particular table. So I'm going to say, ask Rethink to say, give me the table messages. Then for that table, I want to filter out only my messages. So in this case, 2. So only messages that are to me. So where 2 for my user ID in this case, I should pass in the user ID here, the user. So I'm going to pass in the user here, which is the active user. So filter by those messages that comes directly to me. Then I want to fetch all the changes that happen on the table, right? And I'm going to give it a property that says include initial, and this will include the initial changes, so that if you are just subscribing to the change feed but there are messages waiting on the queue for you, then you will immediately get those messages and not have to wait until there's a next change happening on the database. So I'm just gonna say run, pass in my connection, and this change feed here, I want to make it accessible so I can close it also when I dispose of the stream. So I'm just gonna set it in my as a variable here. So I'm just gonna say stream change feed, because change feed is really a stream. Then in my dispose method, I'm gonna say change feed, cancel, just to be safe that we do not leave anything hanging in memory. So now I'm gonna say this change feed as stream So after I get that stream, what I want to do is I'm just going to cast that stream into a feed, and this is a RethinkDB feed. Then after I cast that into a feed, then I go ahead and listen to this stream for new events. Then inside of my listen method, now I am listening to the change feed stream for changes on the message table, those messages that are coming to me. So now that I have access to the feed, I'm listening, I fetch an event, I need to go to that event now and fetch the actual message data from the event. So I'm just going to say event, which also this event is a stream, and I'm going to say for each feed data in this event stream, what I want to do is to say if the feed data has only new val, or it doesn't have any new value. If the feed data new value null, there are no new messages, then I'm just gonna return. And the reason why I add this check here is that the thing with RethinkDB also is that almost every event that happens on the table, it triggers a change feed event. So if you delete a record from the table, it will also trigger the change event. And so you will receive a change event, but there will be no new value. It will be an old value, and so you would know that it's a delete event. So in that case, I do not want to do anything. So if there's a new value, meaning there are actual messages to me, what I want to do is to from that feed data, convert it into my message model. So I'm just gonna say final message, and I'm gonna create a method that says message from feed and pass the feed data into it. Then after I have received or created that message object from the feed data, I want to go ahead now and inside my stream controller, which the client will be accessing or subscribing to receive messages, I want to say add this message. So now I add this message to the stream so that the user or the client that is subscribed to this message stream will receive this message. And after I have sent the message to the user, I also want to remove that message from the database. So I'm treating it like WhatsApp, where messages are not stored on the server, but as soon as the message is delivered, it is removed from the server. And so all your messages are stored locally on the device. And so that's the plan, to store all the messages locally on the device, and no message will be stored on the server, only those that are not delivered. Once the message is delivered, it is removed from the database or the server. So I'm just going to say remove delivered message and pass in the message to be removed. So now I'm just gonna put my catch error here just in case there's an error. For now I'm just gonna print said error, and also on error I'm gonna just print the stack trace or the error. So now, just to create my message from feed and my remove delivered message methods. So now I'll return a message with my message from feed method. This accepts feed data. And basically what this will do is to return message from JSON, and I'm just going to pass in feed data and fetch the new value JSON object from it. So that's that simple method. Now for my remove delivered messages. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell Rethink to delete this message. So again, give me the messages table, get that message based on the ID, and delete that message. And I'm just gonna again add another flag that tell Rethink that when you delete the record, I do not want you to return the changes. So return changes false. Then go ahead and run this query, pass in the connection object. So there we have it. We have our message service ready to go. I just remove this here, and we are good to go and test this, that it is working properly. So now inside of our tests, just gonna go ahead and create that message service test. But first we want to go to our helpers and create that message table. So I'm just gonna copy all this. Instead of users messages, then copy this also. Instead of users messages. So we create our message table, and we'll remove the data when we clean up our message table. So now back to our message test. I'll configure my setup. Need my connection and also my message service, which is the system under test. Now go ahead in your setup method and initialize those dependencies. So for my connection, you want to connect to Rethink, connect, and that will be to my local host, which is 127.0. on my Rethink client port, which is 28015. Again, these ports are all configured to point to the Docker container. So now, after I've established my connection, I can go ahead and create the DB and then initialize my message service. And a similar setup is needed for my tear down method, just to free up the resources. I'm just gonna say dispose and clean my database. Clean up my test database. So now I'm just going to go ahead and create two users to whom message will be sent back and forth. There's my user 1 and my user 2. The first test I want to do is to ensure that messages are sent successfully. So here is my test. Create a message from user ID or from user 1 to a random person, doesn't really matter here. Have your timestamp, have your message, then go ahead and send the message. And I'm expecting that it should be true, meaning that the message was sent. So if I go ahead and run that, we see that our message was sent successfully. And if I should say add a breakpoint here and run then check my database, then you should see a message there. So if I should debug this so that it pauses at the breakpoint. So now that it's at the breakpoint, I can go ahead and check my tables. I should see a message table. If I look there, here's my message from 123 to this person, that timestamp. Go ahead and run that. It should be completed. So now for my next test, I want to test that you successfully subscribed and receive messages. And so here I am subscribing to the messages stream for my user or user 2, then I am using this async expect method to check the message that is returned from the stream. So whenever I receive a message, I am expecting that the message should be to user 2 or to me, and that the ID is not empty. And I am expecting that there will be 2 messages, or this method will be executed twice, since I am sending 2 messages, a first message and a second message. So I created both messages to user 2, as you can see, and I am sending both messages. So I'm expecting to receive 2 messages when I subscribe here. So if I go ahead and run this, then you can see that I am successfully subscribing to and receiving messages. So that is awesome. And I just want to add a third test so that I can check whether or not I will receive new messages when I just sign on or just connect. So here in this test, as you can see that I am checking that I successfully subscribe and receive new messages. And as I said before, new messages meaning that there are messages in the queue for me. So once I log on, subscribe, then I should immediately receive those messages that have been waiting in queue for me. So I created 2 messages. I send the message 1, I send message 2, then when message 2 is completed, or when it was sent successfully, that's when I subscribe. So I have 2 messages in the database, and after those 2 messages have been written, then I subscribe here and listen. And the same expect async 1 message, I'm expecting that there should be a message to user 2, and then there should be 2 messages. And this basically is as a result of, if you remember, inside of our message implementation, where we have changes initial true. So this will fetch all those new changes that has been there waiting for me, even though I haven't subscribed to the messages at the time of their arrival. So now if I go ahead and run this, again, I can see that it is passing. Now, one of the issues that I encounter is that if you should try and run all the tests, not all the tests in the same file, but all the tests in the entire app chat module, then you might run into some failure issues where it's trying to write to the database multiple times because the tests are run in parallel and it's not run on multiple instances of the DB. So just bear that in mind. There is a way to solve that, but just bear that in mind that you have to run the test one by one or run the entire file by itself, and everything should be passing here. As you can see, all the tests are passing for this particular test file. But that's it for this video. We have successfully created our message service. We have tested the most important parts, that messages are being sent, that we can subscribe and receive message, that we can subscribe and receive those new messages that have been waiting to be delivered for us. So thank you once again, guys, for tuning in. Thank you for watching this series, and please like, share, subscribe. Help me to grow this channel further, that together we might improve our skills as Flutter developers. I will share this code on GitHub so that you can go through it. So see you in the next video.